Hello there. It's been a while since I posted anything. I don't have any type of platform, so it's not like I have a real reason to be posting stuff all the time. I completely forgot that I made the channel, so I hopped back on there the other day, just like, oh yeah, what about this? And I saw that I'm now a famous YouTuber because one of those videos that I posted has like 140 views or something like that. So I'm waiting for the millions to come rolling in. Uh, I was kind of prompted because I'm going through psychology courses to wrap up my degree in clinical psychology. Um, I'm kind of at the final stretch here, but so I'm going to Southern New Hampshire University, and I'm sure it's like this across the board, but every single assignment that at the end of this, you have your questions. What are you supposed to blah 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 blah? How does this theory affect this? Blah 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 blah. And then at the end, it'll say something like, what is the impact of theory X or theory Y on diversity, equity, and inclusion? And I always give the exact same response. Equity is not a good thing. If you want people to have free choice, you don't want equity. People don't understand that. They just kind of equate it with equality, which is ironic, I suppose, at least linguistically. Diversity is not inherently good when you're talking about the appearance of people. Just like diversity in the color of cars is not inherently good, it's just amoral. Unless you view people of different skin colors with a different moral value. If you're a racist, as all of these diversity people are, obviously, then you could view diversity of skin color as something that's inherently good. But for those of us reasonable people who accept diversity to be just as meaningless as height or hair color, it's just an immutable characteristic that we've far surpassed caring about that or having any need to care about that because we understand there are no biological differences except on the most minute scale. But that type of stuff is shoved down our throat literally every single assignment, and it's the same thing with the discussion posts. But I don't fuck around with the discussion posts. Like, I just go as hard as I possibly can. And the thought process is, I make a lot of money, so the GI Bill money that I'm getting from school is just extra money. I don't give a shit if you kick me out of the school. That's fine. Because B, it's worth it if some 18-year-old kid is sitting there thinking, or I guess they would be 20, 21, 22, but regardless, some young impressionable person is sitting there reading this day after day, and they're like, man, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe objective reality is not the way I should look at this stuff. So I want to at least be one spear through the door, saying, no, I'm not going to follow any of this stuff. So every single assignment, whether it's discussion or an actual assignment that goes to the teacher, I say equity is a terrible idea, diversity is not inherently good, and inclusion already exists because everybody's equal under the law. So these three things that you guys pretend are issues are not issues. So this theory doesn't, in a modern sense, have any impact on that. Aside from the instances where whatever theory we're talking about can be used and weaponized by the left to divide people racially on the basis of moral value. And obviously, the foundation of all that at the bottom is that white people are better than every other race of people. So we need to look at every other race of people as just these weak little plebeians who, they aren't smart enough, they aren't capable enough, they can't control themselves. And that's why it's acceptable, say, for instance, if you make a noise that a black person doesn't like, well, we just can't expect them to control themselves. If they kill you, that's your fault. That is one of the most racist ways of thinking I've ever heard in my life, because it's not acceptable for anybody to make a noise you don't like and then you physically attack them for it. It's certainly not acceptable for white people to do it. So the idea that it would be for any other race is to implicitly and sometimes explicitly basically say that white people should be held to a higher standard because they have more moral value. At least that's the way I look at it. But back on topic, in a response to something one of my other classmates said, because one of the questions was about microaggressions and are they real. Of course, I was the only one in the class that was like, of course they're not real. They are weak, meager people who have lived the easiest life in world history, deciding for you that you intended to hurt their feelings and then trying to get you fired from your job over it is all microaggressions are. But then the topic of faith got brought into it, as the left always seems to do. Of course, conservatives will bring their faith into it when it's very advantageous for them, but the left will always bring religion into everything. See everything that's going on with the abortion argument. Typically, you don't hear conservatives talking about the faith side of the issue. Typically, that's brought into it by the leftists, saying you keep your religion off our backs. And of course, as I said in the first video, I'm not decided on the abortion issue, but one can feel one way or the other about the abortion issue without the faith part being at all involved. So anyway, the issue of faith was brought into the discussion, and so my response was, without any context, hopefully it'll still make sense. I'm an atheist, but something to keep in mind. In the book of Matthew, I come to bring not peace but a sword, said by Jesus. And the book of Leviticus, if a man lies with a man as with a woman, both have committed an abomination and shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. So this idea, just for a little bit of context, I suppose, that specifically was in response to, in the news, all this stuff about the Rays players not wanting to wear the gay pride thing on their uniform, and all the leftists coming out and saying, because it's faith-based, Jesus preached love, all this, blah, 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 blah. Complete nonsense. And that was relevant in the discussion. But I said, continuing on, I, of course, accept that Jesus was not a real person, but at least the Christians actually know a little bit of what their quote-unquote Lord said. To pretend that Jesus was a peace-loving hippie who only wanted everyone to get along simply shows that you have not one time read the Bible. The Bible openly encourages the killing of homosexuals, the killing of adulterers, the killing of women who are not virgins on their wedding night, the buying, owning, and eternal ownership of slaves, quote-unquote, purchased from the heathen that surrounds you. It is one of the most detestable books ever written, right up there with the Quran, the Hadith, and the Communist Manifesto. I am very glad then that secular and reasonable values have dominated our society for so long. That said, we are witnessing the rise of another religion. It is a mistake to call it leftism, gender ideology, etc. It is far more pernicious and pervasive than that. What we are seeing is the rise of a religion of postmodern moral relativism. This is precisely why it's okay for them but not for you. In a society dominated by moral relativism within the postmodern landscape, any behavior can be justified because you cannot argue against the personal interpretation of anyone else. At the same time, it is a postmodern democracy. A true democracy, meaning true mob rule. If the mob decides subjectively that you're bad, it's game on. There's no contending with individual issues. There is only contending with good versus evil, and literally anything they decide is evil can and must be exterminated. This is why, in the words of a friend of mine, we have reached a point where education on the subject equates to stories of a building, and you and I are far enough up to see the tidal wave of genocide against conservatives out on the horizon. End quote. Those who are not so educated will be the first casualties of a war for reality. The good news is we have all the guns, however. We will indeed win this war, but millions will be killed when the Pol Pot doctrine is enacted. By the way, being an atheist is not a precursor to being a Marxist. This is what your idiot fellow churchgoers tell you. All it means is that I'm far more rational on at least one topic than you. I am a conservative because I'm interested in behaving in accordance with the psychological well-being of sentient creatures. The left is simply acting in a way contrary to our well-being. It is not more complicated than that. Free yourself from the nonsense, abandon your fairy tale so that you might not be such a hypocrite in demanding others abandon theirs. So that last line I thought was a very pertinent issue that I never hear discussed, and it's because one side and the other does not view their doctrinal, everything that they believe and they follow politically or faith based, which is the case for Christians and the moral relativists, is that so if you're a Christian battling against the gender ideology stuff, like Matt Walsh with the What is a Woman, obviously tremendous film. I listen to Matt Walsh sometimes, and over the past couple days, I've heard him talk about the criticism he's received that from our fellow conservatives that, well, you never brought God into the mix. And Matt's point was, I don't need to, and that would be an easy cop out for them. They could just blame religion and move on, and not have to actually contend with the biological reality. I think it was a great decision, because I would have been personally repulsed by the film if it had claimed some such nonsense as, God is the truth, so, if you want to follow God, you have to accept that there's only two sexes. That was one of the several dozen comments that he was talking about he got. But B, you need to be arguing on the basis of objective reality, because the bitter irony and the thing that conservatives probably have never heard in their life is that you are demanding someone else give up their fairy tale in the face of values that you claim come from your own fairy tale. And there are some completely psychologically and morally deluded morons out there who believe that they are a different sex than the one as which they were born, or some other, there are people who probably actually believe that there's some type of like animal creature, whatever nonsense, the rule, if you can think it up, there's been a porno made of it. It's probably the same thing at this point with the gender stuff. If you can think it up, there's probably someone who claims to be of that quote unquote gender. The problem is, some of these people actually believe that they can go from being a man to a woman or vice versa. And the troubling thing is, they believe that just as much as you believe in your God. So for me, here sitting in the middle, yes, I'm on your side, not because I accept the doctrine or because I agree with you on every political point, but because the side I used to be on has completely run all the way off the cliff, and they are now, thousands of feet down, still falling off the cliff, and I just refuse to jump with them. But the position you're in, and what it will all boil down to, which is exactly what Matt said at some point, yes, of course, it all boils down at the end of the day to God. It can all be drawn back to God, and of course God is the basis of everything, and he lives in truth, and God is truth. But you don't need to bring that in because the buck stops at biological reality. The problem is, I don't accept that your God exists. In fact, I'm almost certain, I'm as close to certain as anyone can be about anything, that your God doesn't exist. So, from my point of view, which is objectively the more rational point of view, I don't accept your claim that there's a God because there's no evidence for it. That is objectively the rational point of view. From the rational point of view, you are demanding that other people abandon what is an obvious fairy tale on the basis of your own obvious fairy tale. That's a problem. That is an issue. And I really, really wish, and I hope that we can get to a point where, because, it's almost like walking around in like the movie The Mist. It's almost like walking around in a mist, except the mist is made of irony. And the circles in which I float around nowadays, which they used to be, the Tim Pool libertarians, leaning more left than right, but are reasonable. Now I'm on the conservative side because the liberal side has accepted all of the unreasonable positions. It's like I understand, and I don't think Christianity is the most dangerous ideology out there anymore. At one point, and for a long, long time, it was. But in my lifetime, that's not the case. It no longer is. For one, the Christian church does not have the power it used to. And number two, as Sam Harris says, it's just been beaten into submission by secular values to the point where the Christianity that exists today is entirely neutered, where There is no question in court when someone says, this man, has been convicted of killing a homosexual. You don't have one side saying, yes, that's what the Bible says that I should do. There's a guilty and a not guilty, and the law takes precedence, period. So in that way, Christianity is completely neutered, and it is for that reason that it's not dangerous the way that Islam is. The irony that I'm walking around in, though, is that yes, I'm on your side because postmodern Marxism has already infected everything, infected the minds of every corporation, and is attempting actively, I'm watching it happen, to infect the mind of every college student in the country. It's working its way down through high school. In most places it has taken over. Middle schools, even elementary schools at this point. It is a far, far greater danger to our society and indeed our entire human civilization than is Christianity. But the fact that I'm on your side does not mean that I accept your fairy tale. And the thick, just absolutely unbearable mist of irony that I'm walking around in all the time among these people is that objectively, your fairy tale is the least likely to be true of all fairy tales. In this way, at least all humans in all of human civilization, in the history of human civilization, have not been trying to prove that there's more than two sexes and have failed. That's only been going on for the past, I don't know what you want to call it, 50 years, 100 years at the most. 90, probably, I would venture to say, 95% of all humans who have ever lived have had some conception of God and have tried to varying degrees to prove or to communicate with or show that there is indeed a God and have failed. So postmodern Marxism is far more dangerous than your fairy tale. The problem is every single evidence, every single experiment and bit of evidence ever collected in the history of science tells us that your God does not exist. So you're battling you're using a not so dangerous anymore fairy tale to battle the most dangerous fairy tale to ever hit human civilization, but your fairy tale is objectively far less likely to be real. So just like the buck stops with biological reality when it comes to the sex thing and the gender thing and the what is the woman thing, we need to start doing that with everything. And people, I always hear there's no objective, you have to have some kind of objective moral grounding for people to behave ethically. It's complete bullshit. I think I addressed that in my last video. But you don't, that's just a claim that you're making that is not supported by evidence. You don't have to have an objective moral framework that is the basis for your morals. All you have to do is say, we are a species of animal, and we are working helplessly in our own interest. And what we should be doing is behaving in the interest of sentient creatures on this planet. And postmodern Marxism is objectively not that. To say that the world revolves around your subjective experience is objectively not true. And that's all you have to do. We don't have to follow the God trend. You don't have to have the objective basis. And at the end of it all, you don't have to accept one fairy tale in order to reject another. Please think more about this for any person who's not sure about their belief in God. Your God isn't real. We got to get over this stuff. But you don't need it to be a good person. You don't even need it to be a conservative. I'm a conservative. I got a kid at home. I got a stay-at-home wife. And I got another one on the way. And I'm your traditional American, gun-owning, disabled veteran, conservative American. It's just that I'm rational on every issue, or at least I try to be, on every issue with which I'm consciously aware. I don't have to abandon one fairy tale in favor of another. I just abandon all fairy tales. Please think more about that. Maybe I'll see you guys again soon. Thank you.